Welcome to Florida Focus, a college football podcast. My name is Brandon. I'm a lifetime Seminole fan. Thank you for continuing to stay on the journey with us as we welcome the 2023 college football season. Jarad, Chris, and myself finish our conversation talking about NIL and conference realignment, so thank you for your loyalty. Let's just keep it going. Do you want to talk about some realignment? I mean, we got a lot of things going on there. We don't have to dive into it too much, but as an ACC fan, we joined the ACC in 1992. Tell me what it's like in the future of the conference with conferences, divisions, and what to expect with OU and Texas joining next year.
So my hot take on it is that the SEC made the first move and the best move, right? So they fired the first shot and the best shot that I think that you could do in terms of adding Oklahoma and Texas. A lot of people could argue they're bigger markets. A lot of people could argue that they're more storied, but I think that you took the two programs that most fit your SEC culture, if that's a thing or not. And you took some big money programs in Texas, obviously huge financial move there. And then obviously one of the most storied programs in college football in Oklahoma. And you bring them into the SEC and drop them in that environment. So I think that was a phenomenal move. And I think that as far as conference expansion goes, that was the best move. Obviously, UCLA and USC moving to the Big Ten was a great move. And I am biased. Obviously my team plays in the SEC, so you could take that with a grain of salt. But as looking at it from a playoff expansion point or from a conference realignment point, I think that was the best move. Looking at it from a fan perspective, I hate it, and because I think that all it does is just shore up that we're going to expand the playoff, right? Which I personally don't want. I personally don't care for. I've talked about it ad nauseum with you guys. That I hate the idea of it. I'd rather bring back the BCS and expand the playoff. I don't think it adds parity. But either way, that's neither here nor there. I think that was a great move. And then you look at what the ACC love. The ACC has a lot of pieces on the table. And the big question there, I think, is, do they look to move their pieces or do they look to try and attract other teams?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to get Texas and Oklahoma, and I mean, what bigger names out there? And it makes more sense geographically than pulling from UCLA and USC, a different side of the country. So it makes sense, but I don't like it as a fan either. It's just, I don't know why. I can't put my finger on it. We had enough going, unless you traded someone, take some Vanderbilts and Missouris with you, but I don't know. I don't like the idea of expanding the playoff either. I think at the most 8. The most I would do 8, but I don't know if we're leaning towards just two mega conferences. I don't know what we're going to, but it's a weird dynamic that we're entering into with everyone shifting and moving. But usually teams would move every 7-8 years. You would have a team or a couple teams go, but it's every year now. Every year, big teams are moving somewhere else, and I'm like, what's the end game? Is there an end game? Where's it going towards? I mean, I don't know. It's weird. I get it money wise. I get why they're doing it, but as an old fan sitting on my porch shaking my fist, I don't like it.
So, I like that. So a couple thoughts there. Up until you're talking about shifts every few years, up until the early 90s, everybody that was probably good winning a few games a year and in contention for a bowl game, because the bowl system was very different then, was happy being independent. Florida State didn't join a conference in 1992. And Bobby was good or bad. I say good. Wise enough to say, you know what? I'm tired of playing Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame on the road. I'm going to start playing Georgia Tech, Maryland. When we joined, there were only 9 teams. It was a terrible conference. He knew that. So he said, you know what? I'm just going to go undefeated in this conference and I'm going to vie for a national title that way instead of traveling to all of these huge competitors and maybe winning, maybe not. With the exception of Notre Dame, everybody else is content joining a conference. I'm curious to see what they've done because they've had this marriage with the ACC where we'll play 5 games a year. that's another story. But I'm curious to see how that works. It's pretty much the writing's on the wall. The commissioner of the ACC has said with Florida State, you know what, FSU and Clemson bring in 25 roughly percent of the revenue in this conference, and they get this X payout. I forget what the number is. That's the middle of the road for the SEC. That's as much as like the Mississippi schools. Right. It's not enough. He's like, you know, why would I benefit to join this conference and stay there? The only thing really keeping Florida State in the ACC is our contract with the conference, and which is just absurd. And hey, good for them. They wrote a contract to keep us. Help me out here. You might know, Jarad. It's something like through 2035.
Yeah. The buyout is like $40 million a year or $50 million a year or something crazy.
It's something unobtainable. So like you have to stay in the conference, because if you leave, you forfeit the rights. And you know, I mean, good for the conference, because you see teams like Maryland left the ACC, paid a huge buyout, and it was relatively just a small inconvenience for them. Connecticut said, you know, we're going to leave the whatever conference they were, become independent, and did it. Now they're bankrupting themselves. That's a bad example, but like Florida State is saying, you know what, we need to play the long game here and set the precedent now, because FSU is going to leave the ACC. I'm just going to say it now. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of doing the SEC or Big Ten.
Right. That's the exact question I was going to ask you, is that, you know, obviously I think all fans know that like those days are numbered. I don't think the ACC is going to make it unless something drastically changes with like TV deals or something like that. You know, as a fan, at least let's keep it regional. Like if I would, as an SEC fan, like, you know, I would love to have Clemson. You know, obviously like it's a natural fit. If you've been to Death Valley, like it's a natural fit. Virginia Tech, you know, comes to mind. They're terrible, but they have a big TV market, right? So that here's what's interesting to me is like all of these shifts and changes are going to be based on like TV market money and how much money, you know, how many viewers is this school going to bring you? Virginia Tech, Virginia are going to be North Carolina, are going to be really sought after teams. And you look at Clemson as well, Florida State as well, you know, naturally in there. So, you know, I think that, like Chris mentioned, like, you know, all these moves as a fan, I don't care for them, but, you know, we all see that, you know, the sport is going to be driven more so by money than maybe any time in the past 40, 50 years, and especially when you look at like NIL and things like that. So, you know, those are definitely changes that we're probably going to see here pretty soon. And kind of you look at like what's going on with the Pac-12 right now, with Colorado leaving, and, you know, that conference looks, if Oregon goes, you know, that conference is done, right? I mean, there's nothing else. So, you know, it's going to come down to who's going to fire that next big shot. Is it going to be the Big Ten? Is it going to be the SEC? You know, obviously the commissioner said that they're good, you know, as far as the SEC. They're not looking to add, but you kind of know that that's not true because there's so many things being talked about and discussed right now. So, you know, I don't know what the future of that sport, of our sport, looks like. I don't know that I love it, but it is going to be something to follow. I guess, Chris, what do you think? What do you think the next domino to fall is?
Yeah, I mean, everyone says that they're good till someone writes a big enough check. So I'm not. I didn't mean anything to me. The next, I mean, FSU might be the. I mean, if you think the biggest teams that are left that haven't already moved or about to move, I mean, what's FSU's probably the next one. So I'm trying to think. FSU might. I mean, Miami, just the name. Clemson. I mean, I don't know who's the next one. Who's going to go? I don't know which way this whole thing is going to head towards. My guess, since I mean FSU probably would be the most logical one since already talking about it, and it's a big school. Where they would go? I mean,
Brandon, is there talks of like a conference buying out any of that deal? Like,
so with the ACC, you would have to have, and you might correct me on these numbers, if there are 14 teams in the ACC, and I'd have to look and see exactly how many that is, you would have to have 9 that say we're leaving for the conference to disband. And you don't quite have the numbers, but oddly enough, you're close. Because you already have Florida State, Clemson on board to say, let's go. UNC, and I'm so glad to hear you say the Virginia schools, because oddly enough, those are a good catch for any school, Virginia and Virginia Tech, both. They may not win, but they're going to bring in a ton of money. And let me ask you an honest question: how many recruits do you get from Virginia, Florida? Now that opens that gateway up.
Right. I mean, you think off the top of your head, Percy Harvin is a big Virginia guy that came under Florida. So not a lot, but the ones you get are big time.
There you go. And there's just like a couple of holdouts that are like, you know what, we're just fine where we are. And it's mostly the founder of the ACC, like basically the Tobacco Road schools. So UNC, Duke, Wake Forest. Wake Forest didn't belong in Division I football at all. Let's just clarify that. Their school enrollment is like 4,500 at most. The fact that there is a joke, and I hate it. I don't understand why they're in a conference. Like there are so many other schools you can grab and say, you know what, you belong here. But when you're outmatched by 15 other schools within a 100-mile radius, Wake Forest doesn't belong. They just don't. They've been suckling the teat for a long time, and I'm tired of it. It's ridiculous. But it also makes me mad that they're beating us, so I'm, full disclosure on that too. But yeah, there is a possibility. There's not enough of the school presidents to just get on board with it.
I would say that the Tobacco Road teams would be great for, like, maybe not football, but basketball. I mean, that alone right there would maybe worth taking those teams.
So I guess, like, what's the dream scenario? So, like, for me, when you look at conference realignment, for me personally, I would want some combination of Clemson and either Virginia or North Carolina to, like, join the SEC. Like, to me, that would make my day, right? If I could have, like, trips to Chapel Hill, or to, like, or to Death Valley. Well, the real Death Valley in Clemson. That would make my days. For me personally, if say the SEC has that 2 schools tomorrow, I would want Clemson and North Carolina. What about you guys? Like, where's your dream landing spot, or how does it go for you?
Clemson's a good one. Those are 2 really good schools. I would like North Carolina just for the basketball, to be honest. I don't know if I really want like FSU in Miami because we already play them every year. I don't know. I don't know how they would fit in. But dream. I mean, I do like the Clemson and UNC picks, though.
You could have the Jordan, Oklahoma, us, and North Carolina.
Yeah. That's a really good. I mean, FSU Miami would be cool just because of the names and they're in state. How that one, I don't know how. I like the idea that that's the one out of conference game that we look forward to at the end of the year.
There you go.
How will that mess up if it's another SEC game? I don't know. I like the way it is now with FSU.
I think if you expand it anymore, that game probably has to go away. And if they
yeah,
that's why I don't want that to go away. So yeah,
I
think it would diminish it.
That was a couple of things. So I'll answer your question in a second, Jarad, about the dream where I want to go. My question in the future is, number one, if you're going to keep expanding conferences like this, do you really need to keep the conference title game? If you're going to keep going 8, 16, my God, 32 teams, please don't. But it may happen, but if money drives it enough. You need to do away with that. And you know what? The SEC was visionary in 91 to even start one because no conference had one until then. Wonderful. It served its purpose. But the idea behind it was we need one more ranked win to jump us into number 2 or whatever it was. You don't need that anymore. The playoffs can expand long enough. You don't have to do that. The other question is how many conferences do you end up with? So if you're going Big 12, Big 10, SEC, I don't know that the Pac-12 makes it. If Oregon leaves, that one's probably gone. Are you doing like conference champions and then just highest ranked after that? That's kind of a curious question I have. The Big 10, I'm concerned if Florida State joins the travel. Michigan, Purdue, Michigan State. You see Maryland again, but everyone else is a new opponent. Rutgers. Nebraska needs to get their act together, by the way, and just join the Big 12 again. What have they been doing? I mean, seriously.
Yes,
you lost your tie into Texas. You have sucked. I'm sorry for my language. Ever since you've left the Big 12, what happened? Just go back. see what the buyout is and just make it happen.
Yep.
It's made 0 sense, and they have just been terrible. It is sad as any college football fan from the 70s, 80s, 90s to see Nebraska go where they are. Just to be like, geez, they haven't been in a bowl in several years. They had William Riley's their head coach. I mean, Scott Frost was an interesting grab, and he should have been the answer, but he wasn't. Yuck. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent here. Sorry. But with the divisions, again, go to the head. I actually think Florida State belongs in the SEC the best. I would be sad to see the Florida State-Florida game go away in a lot of sports. And that's what you always built up to in college football. You play 10 or 11 games, you play your rival. If it's in conference, it's a little different. I mean, I would ask Ole Miss, Mississippi fans how that works. I would ask LSU, Auburn, Auburn, Bama fans how that works, just to see how they feel about it. But I would miss the intensity of that game if it's at a conference.
Yeah. I get that, but I think the bigger question is like, if you expand these conferences, if you go 3 or 4, right, not only are you going to lose rivalries, but honestly, in my opinion, you're going to lose the sport. And that's something that's the main reason that I don't like the playoff expansion, is because week 1 needs to be just as important as like week 10 or week 11, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like the what makes college football, in my opinion, so great, and the thing that keeps us coming back week after week, is that, it's like Urban Meyer said when he was a coach before, the best thing about being 4-0 is you can go 5-0. And having to run that gauntlet every week, and the stress, like from a fan perspective, like the stress, the talk around, like what are we going to do for this? Now we're 4-0, now we're 5-0, now we're 6-0. You're jumping through the polls. Maybe you're unranked to start the season. Now you're 22. Now you're 14. Now it's a top 10 matchup, and you're number 8, and you can beat another top 10 team and catapult yourself into the conversation of a BCS game. Like, those conversations and those feelings, in my opinion, are gone if you lose that expansion. Like, oh, who cares? We're 8-4. We're going to make the playoff. Like that to me would like break my heart as a college football fan. Mm-hmm. Like, I want to be in the mindset where I'm just like, oh, we can still make the playoff and make a run. Like, I don't want to watch the NFL. Like, I don't need to be 11-6 and be a wild card team. Like, I don't want that. Yep. So, for me, it's I would love to add teams if that's what we're doing, but ultimately I wish somebody would come in and be like, hey, we need to preserve the sport.
Yeah, exactly.
Dude, preach on. I mean, my concern is you just constantly make the season longer, and then it's not a competition of who's better. It's who can sustain injuries, who can stay healthy,
who's luckier.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, you look at the NFL is a great example of that, because you're like, okay, how many NFL teams have gone undefeated? Okay, the 72 Dolphins, and they played 12 games. Is that right? Don't watch the NFL, don't know. I think they played 12 games and went undefeated to the playoffs. Outside of that, oh my gosh, almost who cares? Yeah. It just, just infuriates me, because you actually played week to week, like Jarad said, and then now you go into this competition where you're like, you know what? The last 2 weeks of the season, I'm playing so and so. Who's he? What's it? Unfortunately, those may be your top rivals, and you're like, oh, I don't care if I win. I'm going to sit my starters, rest them for the playoff, and that's no bueno.
Yeah.
And I think back. Sorry to cut you off, Chris, but I think back to 2006. And I remember we got off to that crazy start, and kind of unsuspecting, and I'm sitting in the student section, and I'm watching us play Auburn, and at that point in the season, you're undefeated. Everybody's starting to talk, but you're starting to get some momentum, and you're like, oh man, we could really make it to Atlanta. Like, this could really happen. And so I'm sitting in the student section as that kick goes through, and we lose to Auburn, right? And in my mind, like, our whole season is over. Like, I'm just sitting there, like, just confused and like distraught. I'm like, this thing is over. Mm-hmm. And as sad of a moment that was as a Florida fan, right? In that moment, looking at season, obviously we go on to win the title that year, but I'm saying that in that moment, those emotions were very real. And as bad as those emotions were, as negative as emotions were, as a fan, right? The world's not ending. Mm-hmm. As a fan, I love that. And I don't ever want anything to take that away. Like, I want to be in the stands, and I want every moment just to be hanging on every heartstring that I have and say, like, oh, man, like, this is over. And now I want that drive home to be miserable. I don't want to, you know what I mean? I want to be talking to my friends and be like, where do we go from here? What do we do next? And if you expand that and you're looking at a 32-team playoff or whatever team playoff, that there's no point to have that feeling, because you're just like, oh, okay, well, you know, we're still 5-1.
Yeah, the as much as we're looking forward to LSU, FSU. I mean, the loser of that game, they could still get in the playoffs.
Oh, like, yeah, very true.
And what do the bowl games factor into this? I mean, I used to love bowl season. Now I'm not so excited anymore because NIL, transfer portal, during the draft early, that's all big factors as well. But I still watch every bowl game, don't get me wrong, but it just diminishes the importance of the bowl game too. And it's just kind of the great things about this sport. It's slowly fading away. Yeah, and it is infuriating. It's sad at the same time too. That you're like, this is why I love this sport. Oh, that's gone. Oh no, this is another why I love this sport. Oh, that's going away too. And I'm still all in, but it's a sad day when you slowly the great things are getting chipped away. And I love that they're adding these great early, the last 10 years or so, these great early matchups in the season. I mean, we're going to Utah. I mean, whoever thought that we would ever do that? But big picture doesn't matter. And I love the fact that every game used to matter. And so, I mean, from the kickoff, from the very beginning of the game, middle of the season to bowl games, every game mattered. And now only some of the games matter. And that's kind of depressing a little bit.
Yeah. I'm going to play devil's advocate for about 30 seconds. And I'm going to say this is what all of the smaller teams wanted. All of the minor conferences were wishing for. This is what all the undefeated teams out of the MAC, out of the Big East, out of the American, out of the Mountain West. This is what the Boise States of the 2000s wanted. And you know what? I'm the old guy like Chris described on his porch shaking his fist, saying, you know what? This is terrible and this was a bad decision. This was a culture that wanted to include everybody. And you know what? You're destroying the sport. Because all of a sudden, all of these games mean nothing. And we're going to have to talk to our children and grandchildren about, you remember the year we went 12-0 and it didn't matter? Or remember the season, let me tell you about the 90s when Florida State, Florida invented the BCS. Let me tell you about the times when Nebraska and Michigan had to split a national title. They're going to be like, what are you talking about? Okay, I'm glad. Sit down, take your phone off, close your apps, and let me tell you, I'm going to school you. Because this is exactly what's going to happen. And we're already on the road to that. And that's a very sad day. It really is. Because it really does melt down to all the other sports. And that's what made college football unique. They had no playoff. Everybody hated it. You know what? So what? Who cared? It came down to who voted and who came down at the end. Okay, so, the media was biased. Oh, number 3, Kansas State didn't make it into the BCS. All right, so there are some years where it didn't work perfectly. But there were also other years where you had glorious matchups, like USC, Texas. Oh, my goodness. Can you imagine? You're not going to have that anymore. You're going to have the team who can survive the longest. You're going to have a team who makes a hot run going into November. And they're going to forget the rest of the regular season where it came down to a game-winning field goal. It just won't matter anymore. And that's the part I'm going to miss, just like Jarad.
Yeah. Yeah, when you think about it, I blame UCF.
Why not?
If they wouldn't have invented a national title for themselves for beating a pre-loss Auburn team, we wouldn't be in the.
That's ground zero. Is that what it is?
Beautiful.
Okay. No, but really, I'd be kind of blaming a little bit.
I actually heard from like one media in 1997 that they were like, 96. Like Florida State won the national title. I'm like, no. Even I wouldn't say that.
Even me and the USC claims those back-to-back titles. Like, I don't claim their first one. They weren't in the BigXII championship.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The 03 one? Or whatever, 102. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
Print that on paper, burn it in the garbage. I don't care.
They beat Michigan in 04. USC beat Michigan in 04. But the national title game, LSU won. They beat Oklahoma or something. Yeah. And so when USC came into that Texas game, they were like, "Oh, we're back-to-back, national champs." And I'm like, "But you weren't."
Exactly.
Like, you didn't win the game. Like, I don't know what you're talking about.
The AP just decided to make their own ruling, and outside of that, and that's, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, we covered a lot. The Gators last year and this year, the Noles, a little bit of UCF, some Miami, some realignment. Any final thoughts? We'll maybe start to wrap up.
The other thing is that I know it got kind of depressing there. I'm still excited for the season. And I know big picture, a lot of changes, and it's a little bit of a downer. And then as a Gator fan, it's still kind of like this season could be a rough one. I'm still excited. Still can't wait till it happens.
Okay. What you got?
College football's back. College football is back. We're under a month away. Talking season is officially over, and we get to line them up and see what happens. So always the best time of the year, right? Home for the Storm, and every day, I'm just checking the message boards, checking the Twitters, seeing what's new and seeing what's going on. So definitely in full season form and ready to go.
Yep.
Wonderful. And yeah, I mean, no one goes into the next season like, we're going to be worse than last year.
Yeah.
There's always optimism. So, all right, fans. Well, we appreciate your listen. We're gonna wrap here, and we appreciate your listenership and coming back to us. We're gonna be back on social media. Find us there. Chris, remember how to find us, and maybe you want to show the fans how that works.
FloridaFocusPodcast.com.
Super easy, right?
Still got it.
Yeah. And expect more of Jarad this year. He's a great guy. He's been a fan of the show for a long time. He has a lot of expertise, as you can tell. I don't have to introduce him anymore. He just his expertise and knowledge speaks for itself. So we appreciate you, Jarad. Thanks.
We can stop referencing him now. He can just speak. So
thank you.
It's good.
All right. Well, this is Brandon saying "Go Nose." Jarad.
This is Jarad saying "Go Gators."
This is Chris. Go Gators.